Get ready. You are about to experience the life science effect. The most influential players in biotech, pharma, and medical device, bringing you their insights and inspirational stories. Are you ready to boost your career? Ready to set your medical innovation in motion? You have arrived at the right place. Every week, another industry leader, more insights, more inspiration, and tips you can implement right away to make your mark on the world. Welcome to the show. Steve Benson here, joined this week by Kurtis Sluss of Brightlamp, and they have just launched an app that they invented that I think you're going to find really interesting. Instead of me trying to butcher it, Kurtis, why don't you tell everybody about the app that you guys just launched?
Sure, yeah. Conceptualized in 2015. Patent was issued in 2018 and just launched here in January of 2019. It is an app that detects neurological function by measuring the pupillary light reflex, which is a fancy way of saying that your pupil's reaction to light. And we characterize that for neurological function disorder abnormalities. Namely, we focus more on concussions, but it's a pretty broad spectrum technology.
So is it I read up on it a little bit, and I know that I'm oversimplifying it. But let's say somebody's playing a sport and they hit their head and they come off the field. We always hear about the concussion protocol, and they're trying to figure out if they have a concussion or if they have something that needs to bring them out of the game. Is this the kind of thing that'll help with that?
Yeah, that's the goal ideally. So right now the technology is class 1 510K exempt device pupillometer. Like that's the only claim that we have. But the primary goal is to get this as an app that can detect readily concussions or head trauma due to sports. So the idea would be that you would take somebody off of the field and then you could utilize it and quickly assess somebody on whether or not they sustained head trauma, and you could keep them out of play rather than them being asymptomatic, but still having signs of neurological dysfunction and throwing them back out there.
So this is not something I could just go download and take to my pickup basketball game and use, right?
Correct.
This is for certified medical professionals, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. For the time being, that is the best route. But it's an interesting model because the only difference between the goal product and the current product is more of a correlation. Mm-hmm. It's the same technology underpinning everything that we do. It just takes a little bit of legwork to get those correlations built.
Looking forward to talking more about that app in a minute, but let's get to know you a little bit first. You're an engineer, you're an entrepreneur. What's your background? When did you decide, hey, I want to be an engineer, or hey, I want to be an entrepreneur?
Okay. Interesting sequence of life choices. It all went back to high school. I had a chemistry class that I was really into. Loved the teacher that taught it. And I thought, engineering might be something for me from a chemical standpoint. Mm-hmm. I was fascinated with...
Where'd you go to high school?
Danville Community High School.
Okay. Danville, Indiana?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Really
not
small
far
town.
from Indianapolis.
Yeah, correct.
Great.
Yep, about 30 minutes away.
Chemistry in high school.
That kind of led me to the engineering passion from a chemical standpoint, but I was a dumb high schooler. I was not very smart. And I think it was because of a lack of passion, probably. And so as I got to college, I went into chemistry first because I actually didn't get into the engineering program.
Okay.
And so I changed my degree option over to engineering, but I kept the chemistry degree as well. So I kept both of those and double majored throughout my course in
what college?
University, Purdue University.
Purdue, okay. Good school.
Yeah, best engineering school around.
Well, one of the best.
Not the best.
It's not. It's sort of like the Rose Hallman of large schools. We'll put it that way.
We'll give you that. So
Kemi from Rose Hallman.
Okay.
In case you're wondering why I'm being
makes a lot of sense.
Parochial. But I like Purdue too. That's a good school.
I think there are different vibes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Purdue has more of a research orientation.
Absolutely.
Right? And then Rose Hallman is more of like professional standpoint. How do we crank people?
Undergrad and professional. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Yep.
Those are the main defining characteristics. Yeah. And I had a pretty research heavy, minded plan as I went into college.
So you got a chemistry degree at Purdue and then continued to get an engineering degree?
Both at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Yep. They don't overlap very much, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it required an extra year. So I was a 5-year student, but I spent a lot of time in research laboratories.
Okay.
That's kind of where I developed my passion for, the medical field. I was doing a lot of drug discovery research, but I also did some novel disease detection as well.
Great.
And 2015, during my final year at Purdue, I had the idea of, if I can do this with current devices in a clinic, what can I do with a mobile phone? The concussion crisis was breaking, and so just kind of tumbled on from there.
Yep. Great. And so you enjoy chemistry in high school, not a star student, but when you show up to college, you find your passion.
Yeah, I wasn't even a star student in a large segment of classes, but what I really thrived in was organic chemistry.
Oh gosh.
It's
that's the weed out class for chemies, by the way.
I went through.
It was my worst class.
It really is a weed out class, but I went through every course all the way up through graduate level that I could. Yeah, so I took 5 organic chemistry classes at Purdue University.
Wow.
Yep, all the way through synthetic organic chemistry, which was like I had graduate, like PhD students in the class with me, and I was doing undergrad.
Wow, that takes a lot of work.
When they found out that I was an undergrad, I got picked on.
Nice, nice. Okay, so you get an engineering degree, a chemistry degree. What made you decide not to? Because I would imagine you could have gone straight to grad school, or you could have picked up something at one of the large pharmaceutical companies. What made you decide to take the huge risk of becoming an entrepreneur?
Pace, I would say. I'm a really fast-moving individual, so I want a little bit of control of what it is that I'm building, but I also want to do it quickly. The issue with, let's say, getting a PhD is it takes a number of years, really dedicated, individualized research, and a lot of publications to build street cred, and then from there you go on and you do either postdoc or industry, and then aspiring, if you're in a postdoc level, to be a full-on professor somewhere. I always had that professorial mindset over time, but that dwindled because I felt personally I could move far quicker if I built everything from the ground up.
Yeah.
So if I can create a solid business case for some of the tasks that I want to accomplish relating to the research, then the research will come naturally as we build that business.
How much involvement or how much help did you get from the Purdue Foundry folks? Was that around at the time?
Yeah. Substantial. Okay. They're the ones that do the early education for new entrepreneurs.
Okay.
I'm a young gun, so I don't know what the hell I'm doing most of the time.
Yeah, I'm an old gun, and I still don't know.
What we figured out is through life, everybody's just pretending to know what they're doing.
Yes, that's a thing.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome is a huge ordeal in this industry. Yeah. So the reason why I can have confidence in what I say about the company is because I overcame that. A lot of people think I'm not really the professional. This is just something that I'm kind of doing. That's really not the case. If you're starting that business, you are the person that knows the most about that. So you have to tell them how it is.
We'll get to Brightlamp and your app in a second, but that point you just made can't be stressed enough. And I don't care, age is just a number, right? So I don't care who you're talking to. There's wisdom coming from everybody. And I want to hear more about that because I only recently discovered that imposter syndrome was an actual thing. I used to just call it one of my greatest fears is that I'm a fraud. And up until about, I'd say 6 or 7 years ago, actually, and I'm turning 50 this year. So I was probably 44, 45 before I realized I wasn't the only one. And it was through some leadership training that I did that I found out as people were opening up, everybody in the room thought, I'm going to be exposed as a fraud. And so I did a little research on it, and I found, 85% of adults have this thing called imposter syndrome. Yeah. And I mean, it's not like you could take a pill and make it go away. So how did you overcome something that most of us have and have to constantly remind ourselves that it's not, that it is just a syndrome and it's not you're not actually an imposter? How'd you overcome that?
Throwing myself into the fire willingly. Okay. When I first started off, pitching and doing public speaking, it was a train wreck, nervousness, fiddling around my words. And it took practice and an understanding that if I'm talking to these individuals and I was invited to do so, then I'm the guy that's in charge. I'm the guy that, can have the most to say about a particular topic. It's a self-realization problem. I think part of the issue that we've seen relating to imposter syndrome over the years is we have more exposure to life around us now. So back in the day, you were in your little compartment in your bubble of influence, your sphere of influence, and you could easily discern whether or not you were the expert or whether or not you just knew a substantial amount. But now if we go on, we can search a name or a keyword and find that there's like, Professor X or Dr. Y or, all the way down the alphabet. And it makes you feel kind of small to some degree. So it's more of like a overcoming problem and just putting yourself out there, and you develop that resiliency over
Was there
time.
a moment that you remember going into something and maybe as you were going in, you thought, oh, there's no way I'm the guy on this. I'm totally making this up as I go. But when you came out of that situation, you said, well, wait a minute, maybe I'm not.
I mean, there are two instances that I can think of, but we'll go with the one that's probably more down to earth. We had a company A, is what we'll call them, come in and, they were looking for information about the product that we built, but more importantly, the underlying mechanism and why it matters. And I thought, because they had, physicians online, they had,
Were they evaluating you to provide funding or to acquire the app or something like that? Or were
more of a
be a
joint effort in research
partner.
And then potential customer. And so partner first, customer later.
Okay.
And it just kind of hit me in the middle of it that I was talking to people that have had far more education than I've ever had in neurology, far more influence in this sector of science, and yet I'm giving them detailed information relating to the functionality of the type of response that we're measuring.
Yeah.
So that was a big moment from like a down to earth standpoint. And then the other one was like, and we talked about this before, TechCrunch Disrupt pitching on stage to over 1,000 people, namely investors and like tech giants. Yeah. That was nuts. When I was back behind stage, I was jumping up and down to like get my energy levels dissipated because I was so nervous.
Wow.
And I get up there and we, crush it. We do really well. And then we come back off and it just felt, serendipitous, like what just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the adrenaline builds up and then it needs somewhere to go. And
exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. Being engineers, I'm sure we both try to figure stuff out, right? So one of the things that clicked for me was learning about cognitive bias. And I do think imposter syndrome is a form of cognitive bias that says, I know everything about me, including all the gaps in my knowledge. And when somebody else, especially like a physician or a company executive comes along, I think cognitively we automatically assume they don't have the same gaps we do, or they don't have different gaps. And so I think our brain, as a survival mechanism, looks for other people to come and be either in charge or to save us or to lead us or whatever, because that's how we survive, right? We look for stronger people to come help us. But that moment when you realize, hey, somebody else is looking at me as though I'm the one that needs to be in charge and I'm the one that needs to lead here. And the idea that everybody contributes. And yes, you can always find there's 7.5 billion people in the world. There will be somebody that knows more than you. But they didn't invent this app. Maybe they could have, but they didn't. You're the one that has it. You're the one that invented it, and you're the one that knows about it.
This is it's basically the underlying theory to, team thinking. If I have gaps in my mentality, I can supplement all of that by, having a group of individuals that can work together for a common goal. That's not to say that, the one person couldn't handle it on their own, but it does make you more dynamic and more knowledgeable as a group.
Yeah.
So that's part of the imposter syndrome ordeal, is that you don't have those individuals to rely on. Yeah. So you're stuck in your own head with those gaps. True. And you immediately assume that a person of higher stature doesn't have those same gaps as you.
Yeah. Speaking of gaps, when you're looking around at the world several years ago, what was going on in the world or in the industry or with people that's made you believe we needed this new app, that the world needs this app? What was going on?
So in 2015, when we got started, the concussion crisis was breaking with the NFL.
There was the movie that came out about.
Oh yeah, with Will Smith. Haven't watched it yet. Funny
hey.
enough, I'll wait until we're a billion dollar company and I'll go and watch it.
There you go. You'll be part of the sequel.
Who knows? Maybe. I would love to star next to Will Smith.
Problem solved. That's the subtitle of the sequel. So.
Yeah. So at that time, we were evaluating a lot of the technologies that were out in the market, and the way we conceptualized the idea was just walking through the patient journey. That was the most important piece, because if I have a concussion, like, what happens next? And the first thing that they always do whenever you see this, whether it be in pop culture or on the field or in the hospital, is they check the person's eyes. And we didn't understand why, but we knew it was significant. And we started doing research, realizing that this was a biomechanical response that could be monitored, and that's why it's relevant and important. And we just took it as an engineering problem. How can I quantify this response? Because everybody's doing it subjectively. And it just kind of rolled on from there. So that's how it got started, was concussions were breaking. But from the mobile device standpoint, people were just then talking about, can I start doing diagnostics on mobile devices? It was relatively new to the field. I mean, we just saw AliveCore with their EKG technology come out, recently, and it's super important technology to have because it empowers and democratizes healthcare. Yeah. But that was in the works back then and wasn't finalized, and people were just now starting to get rolling on new ideas for these mobile devices. So linking those two dots was pretty important for the developmental piece.
So how does it help? So say I'm I don't know, I'm trying to imagine what's your ideal customer? Who are we talking about? What kind of organization is your ideal user? We'll put it that way.
From a target audience standpoint on how we're commercializing this technology right now, we're thinking sports medicine physicians or neurologists or general practitioners that take up that role as like a sports medicine doc, because some of them subspecialize. So from that aspect, we prefer their input and utilization of the product. But it's interesting because it's a lot more broad than that, but you can't hit all of it at once.
Yeah, right.
I had this really insightful conversation with a nurse about a year ago, and I was talking to her about the pupillary light reflex, not hinting to the product that we developed. And I was saying, what do you do? How do you do the tests? Why is it meaningful and important? And how do you record it? What are the metrics that you utilize? And she goes, well, I pull out my phone, I turn on my light on my phone, and I use it that way.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, are you kidding me? You're already using your phone for this, and yet nobody's entered into the market space for just recording it on the phone. Yeah. And that was very insightful because it's broader than just sports med docs. Like, all nursing staff could utilize it to collect data because we're playing a data game now in healthcare. So as much data as you can get to help trend and correlate as quickly as possible to determine any long-term or short-term issues, more acute issues. And we think that it has pretty broad application to hospitals as well.
So let's say I'm a sports medicine organization. How does it help me over the current tools that I have? Sure.
So the main competing tool that we have, or that is out in industry today, they own well over 90% of the market share, and they are a hardware device. Okay. I believe when we went and did some research, it was $9,000 base for the device, and that's like just base device, not all the other stuff you need to make it operable. And from an accessibility standpoint, if I have a full team of nursing staff that need access to the product, well, that's just not feasible. And they quickly become outdated because they're constantly updating the product, and it just doesn't make sense. From a software standpoint, I have a few advantages. I can be dynamic in how I update the technology, so I can constantly push new updates out to the user without there being a lot of headache or repurchasing. I can be more lenient on a pricing structure because I am just a pure software solution. I don't have any overhead for the device. And then on top of that, I can be more aggressive in utilization. The limiting fact for these technologies that are out there today would be that you can't get broad scope global utilization across the board because you don't have the necessary training for the device, or you don't have the resources to acquire the device to be able to utilize it for each nursing staff or each nurse on
Yeah, I was thinking, man, $9,000 for this hardware. If only there were a device that everybody kind of already has and knows how to use that could be dynamically updated, both the operating system and your software.
Doesn't exist.
Boy, if only we had that. That already has all the hardware that you need. Oh man,
it's an easy leap once we go through the process, but it wasn't so easy whenever you're working through the technology, because there are a lot of problems with acquisition using a mobile device.
Well, I can hear everybody now going, well, yeah, but one person has an Android, another person has an iPhone, and he has iOS 10, he has an iPhone X, and she has an iPhone, whatever. So a lot of challenges to overcome.
Oh, for sure. That's why at the moment today, we only operate on iOS devices, because that variability in the market is hard to compensate for. And we always ensure quality of the product. And that's a lot of effort to go through and test every single device. So iPhone 7 and higher is what we suggest for our technology. And we've definitely gone through the work and the pain of annotating all these ground truth images to make sure that it is a reliable system for those, for all iPhones from that iOS range.
So now as a patient, how does this benefit patients ultimately?
So it provides a better system of healthcare, because rather than us taking in subjective information, something that they already do. Can't stress that enough. They're already testing the pupillary light reflex out there, and they're just grading it on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 to 3, and writing down the numbers. Okay, that's one way to do it, but there was some recent literature that was published that said, medical professionals are only about 50% accurate in binning people into the correct bin for sluggishness in the pupillary light reflex. So if I can give you a better tool to quantify that, you can trend it over time, and you can have better patient outcome for the individual as you track this metric. It's also crazy fast. So less than 5 seconds to do the test as part of the UI, and we have simple ways of being able to fill in and auto-populate data for the patient or subject, and then from there you can just go in, test the eye, and then you can go ahead and test the other eye if you choose to do so, all in quick succession. So it doesn't pose any additional time ate up by their workflow utilizing this technology.
And this would work on anybody walking in the door, or do you need a baseline for the person, like how their eyes, I don't know the medical technology behind it.
Yeah, the response is really interesting, and maybe it's just because I've been looking at it for so long, but it is a physiological response across the human population. So there's a plus or minus range for variability for these individuals. If somebody gets knocked in the head and you test them, this, if you've never had a baseline, it's pretty easy to tell based off of how sluggish the response is. But we definitely suggest that you take a baseline if you're capable of doing so with the individual. That way you can track, because concussions they're arbitrary. Somebody picked a point on a line and said, hey, that's a concussion. There's subconcussive events as well, and there's potential to monitor these subconcussive events with technology, so you can track somebody's downtrend and then uptrend with recovery as well.
Gotcha.
So we do recommend a baseline, but not entirely necessary.
You don't absolutely have to have it. Okay.
Right.
Great. Man, this is so interesting. I could talk forever about the product and about you and your journey and everything as well. But let's take a short break. When we come back, I do have a couple of follow-up questions. And about I have one I just thought of about the product, but I'll ask you over break if it's appropriate to ask. That's my teaser to keep people around till after the break. And also a couple of questions about you specifically, and then we'll wrap it up.
Perfect.
Purdue Discovery Park District, a uniquely designed, purpose-driven community that drives creativity and innovation, and where companies, families, and individuals come to live, work, learn, and play in a dynamic, interactive community focused on innovation. Plans include collaborative office and lab space, residential homes, walking paths, restaurants, and more. Purdue University, 150 years of giant leaps. Information at discoveryparkdistrict.com.
Welcome back. We're here still with Kurtis Sluss, and we're just going to wrap up here for a few minutes. I just had a few more questions. So I thought of an app or a way that you could use your app, and you can have this idea, and you don't even need to give me equity in the company or anything. I was thinking law enforcement, because, they pull people over and they get their little flashlight out, and the police officers looking at the person's pupils and try to decide if they're drunk or not, which always seemed like really subjective to me, right? Let's say I'm at a bar and I want, you have those little portable breathalyzers, but if I could whip out my phone and somebody could check my pupils and tell me if I'm drunk or not, although I could probably tell you whether I'm drunk or not, but I'm not being very subjective. So anyway, have you thought about that kind of application?
The answer is 100% yes. Yeah. We started development for an app that we call Tipsy back in early 2017.
Okay.
So it is in the works right now. We had a renaissance in technological development last year. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the data that we collected during that time period wasn't indicative of what was actually being received due to lack of technological validation. And since then, we've completely bolstered that, thrown as much resources as possible, mm-hmm. and we're in a subsequent developmental phase for that technology now, because we want to make sure it's as safe as possible, but it will directly compete with those Bluetooth breathalyzer keychains that you can buy right now.
Right.
Yep.
Because I thought, because the Bluetooth ones, do they connect up with your phone and give you the...
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's a added hardware piece. If we can correlate it in a different way, then that's far easier and more simple for the user.
Plus, it would be fun.
Yeah.
Shine this light in your friend's eyes.
Tell
them to give you their keys.
We've done some preliminary product testing with it, and everybody has a blast.
Oh, I just had another idea, but this one's probably 5 or 10 years down the road. You somehow tie it into the car, and it looks in your eyes, and you can't start the car unless you're sober.
That'd be an interesting integration for sure.
Although they'd already have you got to blow in a tube before you can start the car.
Yeah, they have that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm just fascinated with your story. Again, the way I look at I don't look at age, but you're pretty young, I think, compared to me.
A little bit.
Anyway. And we met through a mutual colleague who I currently work with. He used to work with you. He's pretty young too. But again, for other people about your age, about your level of experience up and coming, what advice do you have? Like maybe they're sitting there in a cubicle or something going, hey, I'm the same way. I don't want to be sitting. I want faster pace. I want more excitement. Not that I'm trying to get you to pull them out of their corporate jobs. So maybe even within their corporate jobs, Yes, you are, right? So what advice do you have for them in terms of the question I always think of is, hey, if you've been out of school for a few years, you probably, even if you haven't bought a house, you bought a car, you have rent, you've developed a certain lifestyle. So the starving entrepreneur thing may not work for you. What would your advice be? Would it be, well, then forget the dream because you're going to have to be a starving entrepreneur for a little while, or are there other ways to approach it?
There are plenty of ways to approach it. When I was working through building up the product to release, I was capable of juggling jobs to keep myself afloat personally while not taking any money from the company itself to get things going. The most profound advice that I can give is keep going unless you have clear metrics for business failure. So everybody says fail fast. I don't really like that term because, of course, you don't want to spend the rest of your life working on something that's never going to take off. But you definitely don't want to treat challenges as failures. That's the number one.
Seth Godin has a pretty good book called The Dip. Do you know who Seth Godin is?
No.
He's a business writer, but he says the same thing. Like, you need data to tell you, is this something I need to quit? Or is this a dip that I need to push through?
Exactly. So, it's extremely important to make sure that you are getting quantifiable metrics to help evaluate your business. Now, me being a young entrepreneur, that is the number one non-starter for entrepreneurs today. A lot of people don't realize that. I think the average age for entrepreneurs in the United States is well over 40.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because we think of
Zuckerberg,
Elon Musk, and the Google guys and all those guys. Just Airbnb. Just the average age of the Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur is 30. Right?
Yeah, exactly. The overcoming factor for that is you surround yourself with people that have ingrained experience. Because when I started, I had no idea how to be an entrepreneur. Starting a business is relatively straightforward. Growing a business is an entirely different ballpark and extremely difficult. So I've watched people who are in their 50s pitch an idea, not having built it, and they get a check right then and there because they know that they had the experience to commercialize it.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
For me and my team, it was a little more difficult starting off. We were able to secure some confidence from investors and bring on board some capital, but not a lot. And my play was, from a team standpoint, was how can I surround myself with the most experience possible to help validate what we're doing?
Yeah.
So I have 2 medical advisors. One's a neurosurgeon, the other one's a sports med doc. And I have a business advisor who's the former CTO of WebMD, AOL, and Napster.
Wow.
So it's extremely important to find those critical individuals to help not speak on your behalf, but promote why this is important and that these guys know what they're talking about.
So it's probably a myth to say, well, you're going to have this great idea, and all you have to do is get out there and invent your idea, and then money will come.
The
right?
world's biggest myth.
It's build an experienced team. Just the alphabets the alphabet soup you just rattled off is huge. I mean, you might say, well, why are they going to work with me? Well, maybe that's where your idea comes in, right? If you have a great idea and some passion behind it, and you can find the right CEO, CTO.
Yeah, maybe you find that in the Valley, but here in the Midwest, it is not a common approach at all.
The Silicon Prairie.
Yeah, sure.
What the Midwest is.
Exactly. It's just not a common approach for investment tactics or bringing on board really early entrepreneurs. It's you don't want to rely on the viral approach. If you're relying on the viral approach to getting your idea or company off the ground, you've already failed.
So what are some so you found these resources to help you out. What are your favorite resources to plug into that kind of network and find those kinds of people?
My favorite resources are local get-togethers in the area, especially in the Midwest. You learn a lot. A lot of people shy away from interactions with, let's say, VCs or common investors in the area because they, again, like imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah,
I don't want to meet with these people, or maybe I pitch my product, they didn't like it immediately, and so I'm not going to talk to them again.
Okay.
Have an open relationship. So use local resources for that community. And then on top of that, there are plenty of digital resources. I'm really busy, so I don't get to read books a whole lot.
Right.
But there are plenty of audio resources that are out there. And then in addition to that, I use Medium a lot to get my constant democratized writing feed.
Medium, what?
Medium.com.
Yep. Okay, medium.com.
It's a great resource from a reading standpoint that allows little snippets of information, knowledgeable information coming from people who have done stuff like this before. Like there's a whole entrepreneur community, coding community. You can find people that love Harry Potter that write about it all the time.
I learned something today. I learned a lot today, but I didn't know about that one. Medium.com.
It's fantastic, and that's what we use to post all of our blogs.
So what do you like to do when you're not inventing cutting-edge medical technology?
Do you want the nerd answer or do you want the entrepreneur answer?
I want the honest, true. What would you tell if we were standing around at a cocktail party? What would you tell me?
At a cocktail party, I definitely would not say this, but I'll say it on this.
Okay.
Let's see. So short of putting in that grueling work life to make sure we're getting the product off the ground, I love more of like fantasy styled
like RPGs
games. Yeah, so I play Dungeons and Dragons quite often.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I'm so happy that it's still a thing. That was my friends and I played when I was in high school in the late 80s. It was our escape from in the 80s, it was really popular to be a jock and be, have nice clothes and all that stuff, which was not me and my friends. So D&D was a great way to escape from all that.
It's the nerdiest thing you could possibly do. And I think it's a little over 40 years now it's existed, I believe. And honestly, it's a great way to put yourself out there, especially related to this imposter syndrome. Let's tie it back to that.
Yeah.
From an imposter syndrome standpoint, you're role playing with people that either you know really well or you don't. And you can talk, communicate, and build a narrative. It's storytelling. It's all it is. It's group storytelling. Yeah. So I think the reason why I like it so much is I spend my days telling a story for the business. Yeah. This allows me to practice that, and then in conjunction with that, have a good time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love my friends and I talk now about how popular the game has become and how it's become kind of cool. Like celebrities,
not nerdy anymore.
Celebrities like to brag that they play D&D, and we're going, "Oh my God!" Back in the day, we were getting it from all sides. Not only was it not cool, but our parents thought we were like summoning demons and going to hell, right? So I'm really happy to hear that.
Yep.
Hey, how can people follow your progress and connect with you? And what's the best way to?
Sure.
Stay
Most
in touch.
resources are available at brightlamp.org. We could not snag.com because somebody else has it, and we don't have the capital resources to purchase it.
Gotcha.
So .org for right now, even though we are a for-profit. Okay. And you can contact us via the contact portal there. You can go to the link for our Medium blog posts. They're pretty informative. We don't really promote the product on those. We kind of tell the story of how we run the business. And we think that's pretty important as well. Yeah. That's the number one way you can get in touch with us.
Great. Well, I've enjoyed getting to know you. I think our listeners are going to enjoy it as well. So they're probably going to go right out to brightlamp.org and get in touch with you. You're going to get a flood of LinkedIn requests probably.
Yeah, you have another subscriber, so.
Excellent. Good to hear. So, hey, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You have just experienced the life science effect. If you liked it, be sure and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And more importantly, tell your colleagues, tell your boss, tell your friends. It'll make you look smart, and maybe it'll even get you a raise. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, BPM Associates. Set your medical innovations in motion. BPM helps life science companies design, manage, and execute their most complex projects. What effect will you cause? Thanks to today's guest and to all of our guests. Who else should I be talking to? Send me an email at steven.vincent@bpm-associates.com. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and go make something amazing happen.